is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me are my two great co-hosts, Fede Perez and Ralph Hannah. And guys, here we are. It is another week of football. We're already into March with a lot of things going on. Obviously, the Copa Libertadores and the Sudamericana are well underway for some Paraguayan teams and for some other Paraguayan teams where their year is over. We're going to talk about the big teams, two big teams, you would say, that their kind of international scene is over, one that's going to be dealing it much more harder because of what's been going on just this year in general with their manager. We'll also talk about what's been going on with Nacional and Trinidense and their chances of qualifying to the Copa Libertadores group stage if we can have four Paraguayan teams in the group stage, which would be unthinkable given the form that we've had. And obviously, we'll talk about what happened to Paraguay at the W Cup, at the maiden W Cup in the United States, how the women's team was able to do, and a surprise, another Paraguayan possibly playing alongside Diego Gomez, Luis Suarez, Lionel Messi at Inter Miami. We'll talk about who's that. But first, let's go straight to what happened, and we'll go to Fede on this one, because obviously we'll talk about the big news that just happened literally almost 12 hours ago, the elimination of Olimpia from the Copa Sudamericana. They took on Sportivo Ameliano. Again, it seems like this team always finds a way to beat Olimpia and be kind of an annoying thorn in their side. It was Sportivo Almeliano that won 2-0 on the day at the Defensores del Chaco, goals from Julio Gonzalez and Alejandro Zamudio to give all the result for Ameliano and advance to the group stage of the Copa Sudamericana and to leave Olimpia without any competition, without any international competition to play for, especially given the kind of the crisis, you would say, of what's been going on at Olimpia with their new manager, with Martin Palermo, their new chairman, Rodrigo Nogues. I mean, Fede, I'll go to you and introduce you here. It's a big shock, you would say, for Olimpia to be eliminated this early from any international competitions and now have to go the entire year without it.
Yeah, hi Roberto, hi Rob, hi to everyone listening to Guarani Vision. It's great to be back, and obviously we do have to talk about straight away about Olimpia because it is one of the taking points. It probably just doesn't surprise anybody again that Ameliano beats them, because it's something that has happened ever since Ameliano has come into first division. They even did it in the Super Cup to win a title over a huge team like Olimpia a couple of years ago. So I mean, even Olimpia fans were kind of waiting for this situation. Because of what the team has shown lately. Yeah, they got a late win against Luqueño, but they pretty much didn't deserve that either. Martin Palermo has just gotten the team not even a month ago. He's still on his first games, and you can see that the coach still not knowing 100% what he has. I'm talking about the players. I'm talking about, the strategy. And in front of him was Pedro Sarabia. Yeah, a different coach from the times that Ameliano has been in Olimpia. But that was Roberto Garcia doing his thing. But Pedro Sarabia had a great strategy, knew exactly what he wanted to do in this game. He gave the ball to Olimpia, and Olimpia did not know what to do with it. And Ameliano hit them just the way they do on set pieces and on counterattack. So they did their job. They knew what they were doing against Olimpia. So I'm happy for Ameliano. They keep on building this tradition. They keep on making history, because it is history for them. But it sucks for Olimpia, a huge team, a team that moves a lot of people here on international stage, be it Libertadores or be it Sudamericana. And we're not going to see them anymore, Roberto, because this was just one game and Olimpia is eliminated. And Guarani also said bye-bye early this year. So it's two big teams out of the way and two big teams that got to put their heads straight on the league, especially Olimpia, because they're third as of right now. So they can still fight for the Apertura, but they do not look like a championship team as of right now.
They do not. And we'll go to Ralph on this one, because certainly going into the other result, the Guarani lost to Sportivo Luqueño, this one was a bit more dramatic given the fact that Luqueño scored from Diego Fernandez in the 87th minute to give the big result for Luqueño. And Ralph, as a fellow former Luqueño native yourself, this is a big result for them, because I think certainly for them, coming back from what had happened of being relegated and trying to find form under someone that's kind of, you would think Olimpia kind of need him right now in Julio Cesar Cáceres. Certainly, this is a surprise, you'd say, for Guarani to be eliminated at this stage. And now it's a big result for them economically as well, to see how they can handle this. For them and Ameliano, I mean, no one expected both of them to go through. I think everyone knew that Guarani and Olimpia could do something given the financial strength and also the team that they have. But for Luqueño and Ameliano to do this, it's a great thing for both of them to advance and move forward in the Copa Sudamericana.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this format is crazy when you think about it, that your whole year can come down to 90 minutes, which it has for Guarani and for Olimpia, and especially in the case of Guarani, that they have suffered. They have suffered so many times with these late goals, right? You have the championship that they lose to Cerro, the Copa Paraguay against Libertad. I remember them missing a penalty. I think is Rodrigo Lopez back in the day, like a last minute penalty in one of these situations. I think it's Copa Libertadores qualification. So they've had a lot of these heartbreaks, right, going through the years, and it's a real shame that you have actually the two oldest clubs in Paraguay, Guarani and Olimpia. They're not going to play international football, and they just had that 90 minutes to do it. But yeah, great results for the other teams, as you're mentioning, Ameliano and Luqueño. I think especially for Luqueño, we're seeing like a bit of a renaissance, right? As you were saying, they got promoted back into Primera, but now they found a good coach as well in Julio César Cáceres. The coach has won a title, or titles actually, multiple in Paraguay in domestic football. And suddenly they're fighting in the league. They're doing very well. But also now with the Sudamericana, they start to dream of 2015 again, which is when they got to the semifinals and they were very close to getting to that Sudamericana final. So, I mean, I think this is really like a rebirth for them. And we're going to see some great games coming up. And for Ameliano, it's continuing really actually the story of dominance against Olimpia, right? I'm sure we'll go into that. But that's 3 games in a row. They've beaten Olimpia. They've won 5 of the last 7. So it's almost not a surprise now that Ameliano keeps beating Olimpia. They seem to be their bogey team, as we say.
Yeah, you got to be happy about Sportivo Luqueño, Ralph. Not just what they did in this Sudamericana game, but what they did against Olimpia. They deserve to win. They deserve to win more games than they have, I believe, in the league also. And they look like a stable team as of right now. You have a starting 11 with a lot of experienced players that are really standing out. Not many injuries happening. So you got a team that's really competitive and really putting everybody on their toes on the local league. You're finally forgetting about relegation. You're not even thinking about that if you're a Luqueño fan. And so you're kind of enjoying this moment. And this is what Luqueño fans dream about, Roberto, being in the international stage, making a name for themselves. And they love going against the big teams. And they love that rivalry on the stands also. And you can see that Luqueño really wanted to show that out. They had so many fans on the stands, and Defensores del Chaco is really far away from Luque, from the city, but they made the trip. And it was not the same thing from Guarani fans, because Guarani has not delivered lately. I mean, they do not have that competitive team. They don't have a star player. They've pretty much been selling all their good young players these last couple of years. So Guarani, you don't know what you're going to get from them. And they've been barely getting some results on the local league. So in the way I saw it, Luqueño was the favorite on this leg. And I'm happy that Luqueño has moved forward, especially with Julio Cáceres, a young coach that's really making a name for himself also. And just a milestone after a milestone. Every team, every big team that loses their coach is thinking about Julio Cáceres, but Luqueño wants nothing to do with that. Luqueño wants Julio Cáceres to keep on doing his job, which has been a really good job. And Diego Fernandez, let's talk about him, because he scored the big goal and he had a great opportunity to close it out against Olimpia. He couldn't score, but he did come through in this Sudamericana game. So it was a good comeback for him. Also, he's a young kid. He still has so much career ahead of him, and I'm happy to see him also pulling through for his team.
Yeah, and I just want to go on to that as well, going back to Ameliano. I mean, Pedro Sarabia, 11 games over Olympia in 24 games. That is a wonderful record against what we call the biggest team in Paraguay. And I think it's certainly a testament, like you said, about how Ameliano has just been so kind of this underdog team that people want to go for, because certainly it's a side that have, come, I think it was about 2 years now in the first division. And I think for them, they understand that they need to win these type of performances and understand that, being Copa Paraguay champions, winning the Supercopa, they allowed themselves to kind of build this kind of mystique towards them. So we'll see how they do in the Sudamericana, Ralph, and in the group stage, but it's looking good so far for them. And I think that momentum of beating Olimpia, beating a tough side with all these players can really help them moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's a good point of who they beat to get here by beating Olimpia, because we've seen actually some of the smaller teams in the group stages in the Sudamericana and really struggle, right? I'm thinking General Caballero, I think were there. They were, receiving some big scores against them. I think Taquari as well didn't have a great time. But both Emiliano, you can see they're very clever the way they set up with Sarabia, who has plenty of experience, and they want to play on the break. They want to play in transition, and they did that against Olimpia, and it worked for the second goal that it comes through there. But they also had like two or three other chances where they could have extended the lead further playing on the break, and so they have a very, I would say, clever structure for these kind of tournament games, which are now going to be thrust into. So hopefully they can do something a bit more than what we've seen some of the other, like I say, smaller teams. I mean, that's not being disrespectful. That's just being honest with the size of the stadium. It's a 4,000 people's stadium that rarely sells out, So just to give that kind of context to people who are watching or listening. But I think we've got some good possibilities. There's no real star name in there. There's not like a one player you would pick out. It's just a very well drilled and well organized team. And what we saw last night as well, just thinking of the contrast with Olimpia, is they had a team that at the moment was not well coached. Now that might be because of time, because Palermo hasn't had that much time. But for example, that first goal at the set piece, you can't have three Ameliano players lining up to head in, and basically there's no defense. That's just poor coaching, right? And so again, like I say, this could be a time thing because we know Palermo hasn't had that much time. But just those kind of very basics that Olimpia weren't able to get right, it has got to be worrying for them if they're going to try and mount a challenge in the Apertura, because now that's what they have to do. They have this big budget now. They've spent all this money on Palermo. He's not cheap. Prato, I don't think is cheap. So they're going to have to do something with these players because they're not going to get any of the money back from Copa Sudamericana.
Yeah, I wanted to go into that actually and go to Fede to close it out. I mean, looking at Olimpia Guarani, and they're kind of few right now, still in the top positions in to win the Apertura, basically, but Guarani are a bit far back. I think 2 points behind Olimpia, who are Guarani are in seventh, Olimpia are in third. I mean, how would you assess this? Because I think for both of them, they understand that they have the obligation to find some momentum and to win, because that's all they need to kind of really save their season.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a weird place with this Olimpia just because of the decision they made with Martin Palermo, the signing of this coach. I mean, he has not done much yet as a coach. He doesn't have the resume yet. He doesn't have the title. So, yeah, obviously he's respected in the locker room because of everything he did when he was a player. But as a coach, he needs to make a name for himself here in Paraguay, especially. And he has no time to lose because Olimpia fans, their patience is very little this year. After what has happened lately, Olympia's not playing at their home ground yet. That's probably a good thing as of right now because that pressure would be off the roof probably if they were playing at home at the new stadium that is now called Osvaldo Dominguez Div. They changed the stadium's name and eventually they will go back to that ground. But as of right now, you're not seeing that touch from the new coach. And I'm kind of weirded out in the sense that before you had a coach like Chiqui Arce, which was a coach that wanted to have the ball. It was all about possession. It was all about let's start over. Let's give it back to the goalkeeper. Let's go back to the defense. Let's start our plays. And with Palermo, it's totally different. It's direct football. Let's put the ball up there. Let's try to bring it down with Breda. Let's try to bring it down with Kevin Parzahuk. And that kind of game style, it could work out in some games. It could work out in a couple of matches, but eventually they'll catch up to you. And that's what I believe what has happened after the first couple of games that Palermo has managed. And these coaches know what to expect. And Ameliano did a great job of bringing that down, of just like I said before, giving the ball to Olimpia and Olimpia just not knowing what to do with the spaces they had. And then you have players that are not standing out, Roberto, players that probably came late in the preseason, did not get prepared for what was coming. And as of right now, you don't have a stable team. You don't know who's going to play alongside Richard Ortiz. You don't know who's going to play in the midfield. You don't know who the best player in Olimpia is as of right now. And I mean, Lucas Prato had 2 good games and everybody was going crazy in Olimpia because the expectations are really low. Delis Gonzalez also got injured. He resigned for like 2-3 years, but it's kind of weird. Their best player is injured. He's been out again. on the international stage when they needed him. So Olimpia has a lot of catching up to do. And I don't know if Palermo is the right coach for the job as of right now. He has very little work with, and he needs to get a team together to fight this Apertura. If not, he might be gone sooner than later. I believe. I don't think the patience is gonna be long with him.
For a club that expects so much in Olimpia, he needs to get it on the right foot, like right now. And I think certainly finding that momentum to get something in the Apertura will help them tremendously. So we'll have to wait and see what happens to them, to Ameliano, to obviously Sportivo Luqueño, and to Guarani as well as they handle their seasons. As we switch gears to two teams where their seasons are also in jeopardy, it's Nacional and Trinidense, who are in the final qualifying stage to decide who goes to the Copa Libertadores group stage. We have Nacional, who unfortunately were unable to get the job done at the Defensores del Chaco, losing 2-0 on the day to Palestino, two second-half goals for the Chilean side. As Trinidense, on the other hand, the following day, they were able to take the lead early on against Colo-Colo, a much tougher side. But then it was Zavala who got the equalizer just 30 minutes from time. And now both these teams, guys, and I'll go to Ralph on this one, are with the obligation to go to Chile to get a result, more so for Nacional having to score 3 goals over there in Chile, whereas Trinidense, they understand that they're under a bigger obligation in the sense that they have a better team that they're facing, but of course they only need to score 1 goal on this one. I mean, it's going to be a bridge too far to ask for both these two teams to qualify. And honestly, I feel confident in Trinidense doing it. It seems like they've kind of been the side that have been really surprising all of us. And yes, Nacional did score 3 against Atlético Nacional over there in Colombia, but it's going to be too much for them to do this again twice, don't you think?
So last week we were the opposite, right? We said probably Nacional have a better chance to go through. Trinidense is going to be too hard. And after 90 minutes of football, it's looking the other way around. I mean, the Nacional game was strange. They were very toothless. They didn't really look like scoring. Palestino only had 2 shots on target, and they both went in. But at the same time, you didn't feel that they were lucky because Nacional just weren't able to offer much. It was very much a performance we've seen from Nacional in the league this season, where they're not doing very well compared to what we've been seeing in the Copa Libertadores, where they seem to step up their level for the big games. And so with this in mind, and just the fact that they've blown their good chance, right? Because remember, their home record was very good going into this. I think they'd won 11 of 13 at Defensores del Chaco in the Libertadores. So that's a really strong record. And that's really what had been helping them through. The idea that they can go to Chile and score 3 goals, it like you say, it looks very, very tough. I'm even trying to think of, have they scored 3 goals in a game this season other than that Atlético Nacional, which was kind of almost remember there were goalkeeper errors that kind of helped that score. So I think is looking very difficult for them, and so this could be the end of the road. And I think it's a shame considering they've done the hard task of getting over Atlético Nacional and maybe not able to step up to this. But also a reminder that it's a small squad and suddenly these games build up very quickly, right? So it's one thing to play the first qualifying phase. Now you're in the third qualifying phase. You've suddenly had a lot of football. They got their game postponed. They were meant to play Libertad at the weekend. They got that postponed because of all the travel and the games. But I think maybe we're seeing that catch up with them. And then just quickly on Trinidense from my side, I mean, yes, I really enjoy watching the Trinidense side. There's some great players, right? You have Del Valles playing well. You have Mana. You have Marcos Ribeiro. So these players with experience, and they like to have the ball at their feet. And so it's quite attractive football. At the same time, I think they only had 20% possession, right, in that game. It was all Colo-Colo. As much as they took the lead and did well, you saw a Colo-Colo team that I think is better man for man, kind of on paper, technically. So again, it's going to be really, really tough for them. But if you take the 2 games in isolation, like I liked what I saw much more from Trinidense in the way they're able to try and play against a stronger rival than what we saw from Nacional.
I was hoping to see the ex-Barcelona Arturo Vidal in Colo-Colo against Marcos Rivero. That would have been an interesting versus guy, but we didn't get that. Maybe he plays on the second game next week, but this Colo-Colo was a lot better than I thought. They really took the ball away from Trinidense. Trinidense barely did anything in the game. So yeah, I think Colo-Colo has, especially because they're going to play against Trinidense, and now at home with their fans, it looks like a big task for Trinidense, especially because there's been a lot of changes in offense. I mean, Pedro Valle is the one that's standing out, but then you don't have a striker as of right now. That center forward position, they've been changing and changing. Arrua has been having problems getting the right player in that spot to make the goals, and now you're going to need them. Just like Nacional is also going to need the goals. They're going to need a huge game again, playing away from home, just like they did against Atlético Nacional. I love it when the Paraguayan teams are up against the wall. That's when they show their best stuff. Hopefully, Nacional can get back into the game, back into the series. Hopefully, get that first goal. Try to get some momentum in the game, because if they don't, it's going to be over very quick. That's the difference, I believe, with Trinidense. I believe Trinidense is one of those teams that's gonna fight until the end. I'm even thinking maybe we have penalties in Chile against Colo Colo, because they're that kind of team. You know, they always put the big teams here in Paraguay against the ropes. They've done it against Olimpia. They did it against Libertad, which is a team that has won the titles lately, and they always gave him a run for their money. So I'm hoping for Trinidense to do the same thing against Colo Colo next week, but as of right now, I think Trinidense has the better opportunity to go on forward if they can go through Colo Colo, and that would be just huge for them, for their history, and just because the way that Colo Colo has prepared themselves with Arturo Vidal and a lot of other players that they signed. We had Guillermo Paiva, even one of the signings, a Paraguayan that was playing for Olimpia that moved to Colo Colo, and he was probably one of the stars also. He was enjoying that his family was in the stands watching him in this game.
Yeah, it's going to be a really big result if either of these two teams are able to do it. I think it's going to be a bridge too far for me personally for Nacional to do this. But hey, they've done it before. We could probably see it again. But for Trinidad, if they're able to get something over there in Chile and eliminate one of the best teams in South America, wow. I mean, that would be a big ding for them for a side that just only got promoted last season. And I just want to switch gears, of course, to what's been going on in the United States, because obviously we've been following the W Gold Cup with Paraguay's run all the way to the quarterfinals that actually had ended on the weekend, taking on Mexico. And I mean, I'll go to you on this one as someone who's covered the event, the group stage. It was kind of a game that, had a bit of a sour taste, because obviously Mexico took the lead from, they took the 2-0 lead from 49 minutes, but then it was, of course, Paraguay coming back, Barbosa getting the goal over there in the 64th minute, a Jessica Martinez penalty that denied of an equalizer. Or you saw Ovalle scoring twice, and Fernandez scoring the only last goal of the game. And, it certainly saw that Paraguay were probably a bit too defensive. They thought that maybe going into the attack, it probably would have helped them moving forward. But you can't deny the valiant performance that Paraguay had in this tournament, and also in this game against Mexico.
Right. It was another 5-goal thriller for Paraguay. They had come out on top against El Salvador the game before, and this one went the other way. It very much was, to use a cliche, a game of two halves, right? Because, like you said, they were much more defensive to start. It was that back three, but basically back five at the beginning of the game, and they didn't offer anything. They didn't really test Mexico, and Mexico were able to take that lead with Ovalle, who's been playing so well. And then we saw that other thing, which I think has been a feature of Paraguay. So one, the defensive setup, but two, that conceding the goal just after halftime. They did the exact same thing against Canada, when at the time it was 2-0, and you were like, can you keep it close? And suddenly it's 3. And in this case, it was 1-0, like, can we do something? And suddenly it's 2. The Jessica Martinez penalty was a huge moment. She's so good under pressure. She's so cool, but in this particular case, I don't think she hits it very well, right? She told us before in the post-match interview, she's always going the same side. She said that against El Salvador, but she usually backs herself to hit the penalty so well that the goalkeeper can't save it. And that really wasn't the case. But then we saw finally Carlos Bona, it's actually just after the penalty miss. It's interesting. Then he makes the attacking substitutions. And that's when you get Barbosa comes on like for Freitas, so that's a like for like. But then you get Rebecca Fernandez comes on for Godoy. So you get the striker on for the midfielder. And suddenly Paraguay is like another team. It's like this breath of fresh air. Mexico are getting tested. And you realize, wow, there's something in here. Especially, it was a lot of direct stuff, but Mexico weren't able to deal with it. The Barbosa goal's a header. The Fernandez goal is a long ball from the captain, from Riveros. And it was that kind of real like pressure that you saw Mexico kind of wobbling. Sure, they had their chances, and that's how they scored the third goal. But it was a much more, I would say, exciting performance from Paraguay and kind of a braver performance in that second half. Not just from the players, but from the coach, right? That he finally made those changes. And I think it gives us plenty to work with. The one thing we said before, if you remember, that they'd lost 4-1 to Mexico in the Pan American Games. This was obviously a much closer game, a better performance from Paraguay. And I think that's what we were looking for. None of us were really expecting them to get into the semifinals. But I think what we saw, what we hoped, was a few positives that we can take as we move into this big project, which is 2027 World Cup.
Yeah, we need to keep on promoting young players also, because you can see that this squad is having problems with the age, and certain players are gonna end their careers very soon. So Raf talked about that on the last episode, that we kind of need those changes already. And I was kind of hoping in this tournament that we would see more of the young players, more of those subs that they're programmed there, and at least get them 20, 30 minutes, no matter what the result is. But I got the sense also in this game that the subs were made a bit late after the second goal, and we started attacking when it was a bit late, right? I think Paraguay can play a bit better with the subs if the right rotation is there. I had that same feeling with the last coach also, that he should have mixed it up a bit more, or had a plan B, a plan C, and I'm not seeing that from this coach either. Yeah, obviously we have a couple of young players that are breaking through. Ralph mentioned Barbosa probably being the one that really stood out. She was already standing out here in Olimpia. When she was already catching my eye when she got the starting role. And there are players that are always there. Alicia Bobadilla, our goalkeeper, she's always doing her thing. She's always being one of the stars of this team. And so you have players to build a team around. You have a locker room that's mentally strong, that has the experience now, but now you got to take it a step further. And that job, I believe, it needs to be done in the league. As of right now, guys, April is about to start in a couple of weeks, and we don't know when the Women's League will start. And that's a big issue. I mean, some of these players went into the Gold Cup not knowing when they were going to play again. And you can't have players 5-6 months inactive. You can't have them that long not playing. It's a huge issue here in Paraguay. And I was looking at Mexico, and I was reading that Mexico's league did not stop, that all players from this Mexico team were from the local league. So we're definitely doing something wrong. We're definitely going a bit behind the rest of the league. So we have some catching up to do. We can work a lot better in the local league. And that's where I believe the new talent, the new road for this national team will begin, Roberto.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ralph, you want to go in and go off, because I think that's kind of the big issue that Paraguay has had, and then kind of really, I wouldn't say given their development a plateau, but certainly it's kind of staled. Really what they're doing is the fact that their league, there is instability of when it's going to start. I mean, that's not how you're supposed to run a team or a national team that wants to go to a World Cup and also compete among the best in South America.
Yeah, there's a few kind of options, solutions, and things, but ultimately, yeah, Paraguay is ranked about 50th in the world, or they were 50th in the world going into the tournament. Mexico are down in the 30s, and they beat Costa Rica about 36th. They want to get to a top 10 team, which is what Carlos Bona said, a top 10, right? So not even in the 30s where Mexico are. These are some of the basics you need, which is a league that is running year round, or at least, regularly. There's other things too, which I talked about with the previous coach, with an interview that I never got to broadcast because they didn't get to the World Cup, so we were waiting for that. But one of the plans that have been in place was there's the idea of central contracts. So why don't you get players instead of being contracted by Olimpia and Cerro and Libertad, they're contracted by the APFA, the Paraguayan FA. That's something that they're considering, because that way these players are still getting paid, right? Because they're not getting paid in this 5 months that the league isn't happening. It's not year-round contracts. So that would be a way you're still getting paid. That way you can still be training, and you can use, say, the Paraguayan Olympic Committee facilities, and you go all Carfem and all that kind of stuff. So that's another idea. And then the other one's the scouting, right? So they played El Salvador. El Salvador was a team where they actually spoke to each other in English. They were nearly all foreign born. Most of them played college soccer in the US. It was really interesting listening to them speaking English. The coach would shout something in Spanish and then suddenly shouted in English because he realized like he was getting through to the players better. There's enough Paraguayans in Spain, in Argentina, and here in the US where you could be finding those players too. It's obviously a question of budget. How do you have enough budget to be doing this scouting network out there? At the moment, Paraguay don't have that. If they had qualified for the World Cup, they said it was what they're going to do. But I think in a way you need to invest this money to try and take yourself to that level to then be able to go to the World Cup. You can't wait for the World Cup qualification to happen. So I think there's a few things, right? So there's the league, there's a possibility of central contracts, which I don't think is out of the question, and there's the scouting and getting Paraguayan players from around the world, not just the local league.
100%, 100%. We'll have to wait and see what happens to them and their future as a national team players and even at clubs as well. And I wanted to switch gears to another to close it off. One player that his future might be heading all the way back to not back to, but heading to South Beach, heading to Miami, and that is Matias Rojas, who apparently has been reported by numerous sources in Argentina and in Paraguay that will be joining Lionel Messi, Luis Suarez, and more importantly, Diego Gomez and Tata Martino at Inter Miami in MLS. I mean, Fede, this comes as a surprise. This was something that no one really expected because he was obviously playing. He had his trade in Corinthians. I think he'd come back from a big injury and he was only just finding his feet over there. Obviously, we've known him during his time in Argentina, playing at Racing, Defensa y Justicia, and of course, as a player on the national team. You have to remember, he's a player that's been getting consistent minutes on the national team. So for him to get this move at his age, he's 20, I think he turns 29 this year. It comes as a surprise. I didn't expect it. And I think I look at a player like him, and my only fear is how consistent is he? How good can he be playing alongside Messi, Suarez, Gomez, and many other players that they got. They just got Federico Redondo, who plays in that midfield and kind of in a position where Matias Rojas can play. But ultimately, this is someone that is going to come in the way that he plays and his role, kind of as an understudy for Lionel Messi, because I genuinely don't know where I'll see him start on this team, especially now into Miami, given the fact that they haven't lost yet so far this season.
Yeah, into Miami, I was looking at the roster. They have a whole bunch of midfielders as of right now, so I don't know where he's gonna probably fit in. But I do think that Tata Martino wants a whole bunch of players to rotate. He wants young players to bring in different stuff to the team, kind of surprise the league also with their magic. And Matias Rojas does have some magic on his feet. He's shown it before. He's shown it in Libertadores, scoring, I believe, one of the best goals I've seen these last couple of years from half field with the Racing jersey. And yeah, when I saw this player leave Paraguay, he was probably not one of those players that you said, okay, this guy's going to end up in Europe. He's going to end up in a big team. But after what I saw in Lanús, in Racing, I thought that he was starting to be that player. I thought that he could turn into a European caliber player, but he ended up in Brazil. And it was a deal with a lot of money behind it because he was really in a really good moment right then when Corinthians hired him. Then he had the injury. It took him a while to get back into his shape. Corinthians did not have the patience with him. They ended up not paying him. That's the reason why he's leaving free from Corinthians to Inter Miami. This is something that clearly has helped out for Inter Miami to hire him, I believe. And it is a surprise where he's going with the players that he's going to share with the league that he's going to. But it's great for him. I mean, it's great motivation to be back to go back and be the player that we know that he can be and evolve as a player also. I don't think we've seen the best out of Matias Rojas yet. And, he's in that age range where he can make the difference still and and even come back eventually to the Paraguayan League and be a star. I mean, that's what eventually I think will happen with him. He left Cerro very young, and I do think he wants to come back eventually. But as of right now, this challenge looks really nice. Playing alongside with Messi, Luis Suarez, who have been scoring. They've been doing really well. Diego Gomez has the starting role. He's earned it. And Tata Martino, let's not forget about him. He did it with Almiron. He's doing it again with other Paraguayans. And we, before Inter Miami, Ralph, we hadn't had a Paraguayan play alongside with Messi. Now we got two with him.
We got two. Although the word alongside is interesting because what I'm hearing from Inter Miami is that I think Rojas has actually been brought in to replace Messi, not replace in terms of play ahead of him. But those games when Messi is getting tired, by the way, last night against Nashville, he came off. They said already he's got muscle fatigue, which he suffered with last year. Like that was a thing last year where a lot of games didn't play. So it's like, we just need someone to fit in when Messi isn't playing. Somebody like Matias Rojas is really interesting, right? Because he was always the protagonist, like we're talking about at Racing. He wants to be like the star. He wants to be at the top. He wants to be that key guy. So how do you get him to sit on the bench and be happy? Well, if you put him behind Messi, then no one has any argument. So I think this was actually maybe it's a very clever move from Tata Martino, getting a guy that he knows he can have on the bench, but keep him motivated to be on the bench, knowing that he's sitting behind Messi. And what we might see is much more minutes, right? Like late minutes. So like from the 70th minute on. And that's when also he's very dangerous, I think, Matias Rojas, because he's very good at set pieces. And so as things are getting a bit tired or the games are getting stretched, he's a nice guy to have and bring on the pitch. I do agree with some of the comments that, yeah, we never saw him like fully live up to his potential. And I think that the interesting thing for me when I saw that he decided to go to Corinthians and not try himself maybe in Europe, and what we were hearing at the time of the other clubs that were rumored to be in for him was from Saudi Arabia, from UAE, Russia as well. I think there's a possibility. He was looking to make money, right? I think that's ultimately what his motivation was for that move in his career. He was like, okay, this is my time. I need to make some good money. And that's why he chose Corinthians. And of course, it's ironic that now Corinthians have not followed through with that money, which was maybe one of the key reasons for choosing them over a European team that might not have been able to offer as much. But now, yeah, it's going to be really exciting and interesting to see. We know as well that Tata Martino, he's talked about it. He's been open about it, that he wants more Paraguayan players into Miami. He likes Paraguayan players. He knows he's got a good, you get good value for money, right? They're getting a great deal here with Rojas. They got a great deal with Diego Gomez. How much is Diego Gomez worth now, right? So he knows it's a good market to use. And we're seeing that, right? It's becoming very Argentinian and very Southern Cone, South American all of a sudden into Miami with Martino's influence.
It feels as if, though, it's kind of a throwback. I mean, obviously, this is a whole different ball game and much better players, Fede, but it's kind of a throw, and I'd like Ralph's thoughts on this as well, but it's kind of a throwback to what he did at Atlanta United, getting these young players from South America, or at least players that are trying to revive their careers, like Joseph Martinez when he did it. And yeah, it seems, of course, it's a different level when you have someone like Lionel Messi, Suarez, Busquets, Alba, four legends at Barcelona, and obviously what they've done in their careers. But you look at your supporting base. You have your Argentines, you got Aviles, Farias, obviously he's injured, but Redondo who's coming. Now you got other Paraguayans like Diego Gomez and potentially Matias Rojas. You're finding a base of balance, and of course, I mean, there always is going to be that, and I think this might be a bit biased in a way, if that makes sense. But I think for some of these Paraguayans, they want to play with Messi. As far as we know, that's something that we don't. That's not up for debate. But I think given how popular Tata Martino is and how much he means to a lot of Paraguayans, like Diego Gomez and Matias Rojas, who, they never had the chance to be coached by them until now, it's a big deal. It really is a big deal for them, and it's a kind of an honor as well.
Yeah, some of these young players, I mean, they grew up watching TV and watching Tata Martino. So for them now as players, to get the chance to be managed by him, I mean, it's obviously huge. It could be a game changer for them in their career. It happened with Almiron, and hopefully it does happen the same thing with Diego Gomez. I don't think we can do this. We can compare that with Matias, because Matias is probably, turning 30. He's not going to get to Europe anymore. So eventually you're thinking he's probably going to come back to the country. That's why I mentioned Cerro Porteño probably being the way that he's going to lock up his career, just like a lot of Cerro fans are waiting for the Romero twins to eventually make that decision also. But for Diego Gomez, guys, I don't know. There's even rumors lately that after what happened in the Pre-Olímpico, he's being followed by big teams in Europe, and he's still a very young player. So I don't know. As of right now, I would think Diego Gomez might even take it a little bit further than Inter Miami. I think he's going to play this whole season, but he's starting to get offers because he's in a great moment. He's playing on the senior national team. He was probably the best player in the Pre-Olímpico. So I wouldn't go that far as to say Diego Gomez is going to be there for a long time. I'm thinking that Diego Gomez is ready for the next step, and I don't think he's going to take that long to take it either. For Matias Rojas, I do think he's going to have eventually that spot that you guys are talking about coming out of the team. I don't think he's going to be a starting player just because along his career he's had that problem with injuries, playing every 3 days. So I do think that second role is the one that fits him even better.
Yeah, and he's there for, when this gets officially confirmed, he'll be there only until the end of the season, 2024, with the option to extend for 1 year. So he has to do well in that time so they can extend the option. But it would make sense, right? Because assuming Messi is staying until the World Cup, Messi's going to be playing less and less as time goes on. So it gives him a bit more of a chance to fill that role. So I think it works really well. And yeah, Diego Gomez is one of those players that I think we know he could even be gone as soon as June, right? Because that's the big market for Europe. So it's a real possibility, and I think that's partly why Federico Redondo has been signed. They're already planning ahead. But then maybe the question for us as well is who's the next Paraguayan to end up in Miami? So there's plenty of other players. Could it be Fabricio Peralta? Could it be somebody else? I don't think this is the last Paraguayan player we're going to see head into Miami this year. So let's see in June or maybe towards the end of the year before the January transfer market. But I think it's definitely now we can see this theme from Tata Martino that he's looking for these kind of players.
It's going to be exciting to see what happens to Matias Rojas, to Inter Miami, and to a lot of other Paraguayans all across the continent and how they deal with their seasons as we close out another great episode of Guarani Vision. For myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.